Okay. Hello, everyone. I want to believe that now you are okay wherever you are. We are going to treat a language concept today. And before that, let me introduce myself to you. I am Mohapi, a subject advisor for English, and I'm going to share today's session with you, the grade 7s. And let me indicate that now the focus is mainly on the grade 7, but all the grades, because language concepts cut across. So all the grades will benefit a lot from this session. Although the grade 7s are my focus for now. But the grade 4 and the grade 6, this also involves you, and I hope that now every one of you will enjoy today's session. I have already introduced myself, and let me also indicate to you that now the topic I'm going to deal with today, it's adjectives, of which I believe that now most of you or all of you know what an adjective is. But now we are going to treat this concept a little bit further in details for your better understanding and application. Because at the end of it all, I would like you to be able to apply the skills that we have learned from this lesson, so that now in your classrooms, you no longer have that bigger challenge of dealing with adjectives. Now, how am I going to deal with this adjective? This adjective, I'm going to deal with it by introducing a text. Language, we treat language in context. So I'm going to read a text to you, and you've got to understand what the text is about for you to be able to apply adjectives that we are going to identify from the text correctly. It's very important for us to understand the text. We don't say this is, it's not, but the text is actually not for comprehension. We don't do that because we treat language in context. We've got to understand and know how these grammar or grammatical concepts are used in a text. Surely, my grade 7s, you know that now even at school, your teachers treat the language concepts within a given text. In other words, they will read a text to you, and then they will ask you to identify, to circle, or to write down whatever language concept they are dealing with down for your own understanding. And in this instance, I'm going to read a text and I'll ask you to note down the adjectives that will come across in this text. I will also help you to identify some of the adjectives. I'm not going to do every piece of these adjectives. I'm going to leave the rest of the work to you. And at the end of it all, I will give you an activity that you'll have to do just to show that now you understand what an adjective is. Because I'm going to go through the lesson giving you a lot of examples for you to be able to understand the adjectives better. And I want to believe that now you are with me. And thank you very much, the grade 7s and the grade and all the learners in the intermediate phase, grade 4 to grade 7, as this is our session. And I want to thank you very much for that. Now, like I indicated to you, that now I'm going to start by reading a text. And as I read this text, I want you to understand what the text is about and what happens in this text. And thereafter, we will come to our topic of the day, adjectives. Because from that text, we are going to look at how adjectives are used in context. Remember that now context is a big word nowadays. Whatever we do, we treat it within context. Now, you are my grade 7 learners, as you have dealt with a number of language concepts, and this is not going to be something new to you, but it's just an experience of sharing this concept with a different person, because most of you are used to your teachers, isn't it? You are so much used to your teachers. So let me come and deal with this with you, just for you to hear a different voice. I know that now teachers are doing a lot of work and they are supporting you quite a lot. with whatever content they deal with in the classroom. But now you are going to hear it from a different person. Most of you, 99.9% of you, do not even know me. But now you are going to know me as we go through this lesson, so that now even the next time you deal with this lesson with your teachers in the classroom, you know that now, oh, this is what I have seen being presented at IBP session. And I know what an adjective is. So your teachers will now try to close the gaps where gaps will still exist, and they'll try to bring you on board on what perhaps you would have not understood well from this session that we are going to share with you. So on that note, I want to thank you very much for the time that you take to listen to these sessions, because these are actually meant for you. This is your stuff, and you've got to watch it, and you've got to listen to it time and again, and you've got to apply the knowledge that you have gained from these lessons, so that now you do not forget. Because once you internalize something that you understand freshly, it's not easy for you, it won't be easy for you to forget it. Isn't it? Thank you very much, my grade 7s and the rest of the intermediate phase learners. Now, let me read a text for you. What I'm going to do now is to read this text, where now we are going to, as we read, now the only thing that I want you to focus on as I read the text for the first time, it's what the text is about. What is it that the text is telling you? That's what I want you to focus on. And then when I read for the second time, then I'll say to you, I'll give you a little activity. I'll give an instruction, not an activity, but an instruction in terms of what is it that you have to do. Now let's start reading the text. Here is a text, and the title of our text is Derailment. Derailment. And I know that now some of you know what a derailment is. You know, when a train, it's moving, a train moves on a railway, né? And then if it happens that it gets out of the railway, there will be danger, and that we call a derailment. In other words, there was something happened. Now the train got out of the railway, and when that happens, we know that now we are not going to get good news. Now, derailment. Let me read this text for you. Benno and Willie stood on the roadside above the creek, waiting to watch the train go over the bridge. It was a sight that Benno couldn't resist. The black onrush of the engine, the sweet, wet smell of steam and coal, the hollow sound of the engine roared on the pylons. The front wheels on the level of the crossing. As they did so, they struck the buckled section and the weakened rail, suddenly taking them full weight. Pacific steam engine slid away. The front bogies jumped the line and the heavy driving wheels followed. An instant later, the derailed train was charging forward across the sleepers, hurling chips of wood, spikes, and the great showers of the fiery sparks to the left and right. She's derailed. We are off the line. Jump, yelled the driver. Jump for your life. The fireman leaped from the opposite doorway, and the driver followed. An instant later, the huge engine pitched over the edge, fell on its side, crashed into the creek with a deafening roar. That's the end of our text. Now I'm going to read the text again. As I so do, I'm going to ask you to identify the adjectives. You can write them down on a piece of paper. You can write the adjectives down on a piece of paper. And I will come and identify some of the adjectives with you. And we'll see if you have gone right in terms of identifying the adjectives in this text. Now let me read the text again. Now this time you are going to identify the adjectives. Benno and Willie stood on the roadside above the creek waiting to watch the train go over the bridge. It was a sight that Benno couldn't resist. The black onrush of the engine, the sweet, wet smell of the steam and coal, the hollow sound as the engine roared on the pylons. The front wheels rushed onto the level crossing. As they did so, they struck the buckled section, and the weakened rail, suddenly taking full weight Pacific steam engine, slid away. The front bogies jumped the line, and the heavy driving wheels followed. An instant later, the derailed train was charging forward across the sleepers, hurling chips of wood, spikes, and the great showers of the fiery sparks to the left and right. She's derailed. We are off the line. Jump, yelled the driver. Jump for your life. The fireman leaped from the opposite doorway and the driver followed. An instant later, the huge engine pitched over the edge, fell on its side, crashed into the creek with a deafening sound. Now from this text, let's try to identify some of the words. I'm told that now time is a bit against me. I'll try to rush, but I'm not going to identify all the adjectives. Now let's look at the first paragraph. Then he stood on the roadside above the creek, waiting to watch the train go over the bridge. It was a sight that Benno couldn't resist. The black onrush of the engine, the black onrush of the engine. Now we can underline this word, black. I want to underline this for you. Black. The sweet, wet smile, the sweet, wet smile of the steam and coal, the hollow sound as the engine roared on the pylons. The front wheel rushed to the level crossing. As they did, they struck the buckled section, and the weakened railway. You see, there are a number of adjectives on this text that we can deal with, a number of those adjectives. And let me just try to move to another paragraph and see if I can come up with an adjective there. Derailed train. Okay, here we say derailed train. Derailed train. Derailed train. Now, you'll see the words that I'm underlining as we come to the definition of what an adjective is, because this word derail tells us more about rail, which is a noun in this instance. Now, the sweet, wet smell of steam is a noun. Now, these words explains to us, tells us more about. These words tell us more about steam. Which word did I underline again? Okay, and instead, okay, derailed, I spoke about derailed. Let me check, let's move somewhere. A huge engine. Let's move to the last paragraph. Here we've got a huge engine. It's a noun. Now this huge, it tells us more about the engine. It tells us more, it describes the size of the engine, which is a huge engine. Now we have a deafening sound. Now here we have a deafening sound. You'll see that now when we explain the adjectives, adjectives also tells us more about the quality. Now this sound is a deafening sound. It tells us more about the quality of it's a deafening roar. Eh? This is a sound made. It's a noun, but now this roar was, how was it? It was deafening. So those words are the adjectives. I want to believe that now there are a number of adjectives here, but you have also identified some of these adjectives that I have identified. Now this, because they are used in a text, you can understand how an adjective is used in context. Are we together at the grade 7s? Yeah, this is basically what we are going to do. But now, like I asked you to identify adjectives, and by then, some of you did not even know what an adjective is. If a grade 5 learner or grade 4 learner is also listening, watching this, then that grade 4 learner doesn't, perhaps not, they do. Perhaps some do not know what an adjective is. So in this instance, it says, I just ask you to identify the adjectives without me explaining to you what an adjective is. Am I a good or a bad teacher, grade 7s? Am I a good or a bad teacher? I'm not such a good teacher because I asked you to identify adjectives without telling you what an adjective is. Yeah, I'm not such a good teacher. Yeah, but I also wanted to accommodate your prior knowledge because some of you know adjectives. So your prior knowledge, I wanted to accommodate that also. Now let's come to adjectives and the definition of what adjectives are. Okay, let's talk about the adjectives now here. Let me do this. Now I'm going to move to this is when I want to come. Adjectives definition, okay, not definition as such in this instance. Perhaps I was too quick to write definitions, but now let's talk about adjectives. We say life without adjectives would be difficult, isn't it? It would also be frustrating and extremely dull if we did not have adjectives. Life would be dull because adjectives describe and modify things. Huh? Adjectives, they describe and they modify things. Without adjectives, life would be so dull. Life would be so frustrating, you know. And in some instances, we wouldn't be in a position to understand some of the things better as they are explained because adjectives tell us more about nouns. If someone talks about a book and we want to know which book is this, that person will say, that thick book. Now, just think of the following adjectives. Ne? Just think of the following adjectives. Hot. Can you use it in a sentence? Hot. We say, the meal is hot. Or a hot meal. Freezing temperatures. What about beautiful? Can you attach this adjective to a noun to describe that noun? A beautiful dress, a beautiful car, a beautiful girl, hypnotic. You know, you are caught up by this hypnotic charm. You can say a hypnotic charm. Hypnotic is something that really catches your attention. It's a hypnotic charm. And what about colorful? Can you see that now adjectives gives a lot of meaning to life because we are able to describe things based on this aspect or word called adjectives. Adjectives are so good. So hence we say life without adjectives would be so dull. It would be so dull, life without adjectives, ne? Isn't it? Yeah, it won't be good. It wouldn't be good at all. Now, let's come to what adjectives are. Let's now come to what adjectives are. And I just want you to keep this, what I have, notes that I have about adjectives in mind, because I say life without adjectives would be difficult, frustrating, extremely dull, because adjectives describe and modifies things. Now let's come to the definition of what can you say an adjective is if you are asked to say it in your own words, my grade 7 learners. What is an adjective? Say it in your own words. Share, discuss first with your peers and come up with a solid or a defining definition of what an adjective is. Can you do that? Yes, you can do it, my grade 7. Now let's come to this one. Then we say here, what are adjectives? Adjectives are words used to describe or modify a noun or a pronoun. In other words, where we underlined a word as an adjective in our text, we need to attach the word that we underlined, an adjective, to a noun. Which noun does that adjective modify? Or which noun does that adjective describe? Because we are told here, an adjective is a word that is used to describe or modify a noun. It is a describing word. Can you think of a describing word? Yes, the describing words are the words that you underlined in a text. Can you come up with your own words? A tall boy. What? A red car. When you say a red car, in other words, you will know the car that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a black car, a white car, but I'm talking about a red car. Can you see that red tells us more, or it describes a what? A car, which is a noun. Now, let's look at this one. We say it describes the noun or pronoun by adding interest or meaning to it. Huh? It's a describing word. It describes the noun or the pronoun by adding interest or meaning to it. Interest. I want us to look at this word, interest, because we said life would be dull. Life would be so boring without adjectives. Now something interesting. We say, when you see an interesting, so it's interesting, like if we say, for instance, let me think, and I want to believe that of the grade 7s, you are also thinking wherever you are. Let me say an interesting story or a good story. A good story is an interesting story. A good story. Yeah? It's the story that I've just read. It's a good story, or it is a bad story. I see. So it gives interest to a noun or a pronoun. Now, adjectives answer the following questions. What kind? These are the questions that are answered by an adjective. When I say what kind, it's okay. What kind of what? Of a car. I'm saying a new car or a stripped tie. Like some of you have that stripped ties on. Which one? Every page. Or a blue shirt. No, I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about a blue shirt. Or how many? One hamburger. Or many sheep. How much? No food. Little rain. How much rain did we have let's say last month, for an example? No, we had little rain. Or we had much rain. You see, these are the adjectives. In other words, they describe the noun in a very meaningful or interesting way. That's what adjectives will do for you, or that's what adjectives stand for. Hence we say they are so interesting and we cannot live without the adjectives. Now, More notes on the adjectives. An adjective add color, shape, size, strength, feeling or quality to a noun. Can you see how good adjectives are? Because they add color. Sipho has a white shirt on. Or Mpo has what? Black shoes, for an example. Or she has an interesting story to tell. But look at Sipho. He has sad or bad news. Sipho received bad news this morning. And we're saying they add strength, feeling, or quality to a noun. Now let's look at the examples that I have here. And before that, we say, adjectives are so good, and good writers use adjectives to make their writing come alive. Sometimes we become so interested in reading and writing because good writers make their writing come alive. Come alive, they make it interesting for us so that now we want to read more about what they have written because of the language that they use when they write their stories or whatever text that now they want us to read. Now, let's look at these examples. A sad story. Because we said here, remember we said an adjective add color, shape, size, strength, feeling, or quality to a noun. Now, let's look at this. A sad story, it's a feeling. I feel sad after reading this story. In other words, that adjective sad, it tells more about the feeling, how a person feels. I feel sad after reading this story. Or, yes, after listening to the story, I feel a bit sad because there might be a certain character that you associate with in a story, and this character went through some not so good stuff, and then you feel you feel so sad. It's so sad that now it happened that way. Now, when you talk about size, adjectives also add size to a noun. We say a house is a noun, but it's a gigantic house. Gigantic, it denotes size, how big the house is. There is sound outside. There is some noise, music outside, or you are listening to a music in your own room. Then we say it's a deafening music because you are playing it so loud. It's deafening. Could you please lower the volume because the music is so deafening. The sound is so deafening. That's what? That's a quality. The quality of the sound. We say a deafening music or a deafening sound. That's a quality because you are playing it so loud. Hence, we say it's a deafening music. Now, let's look at the kinds of adjectives. Because we have been speaking about adjectives, but it's also important for us to note that now adjectives have got kinds. We've got different kinds of adjectives. Can you think of any, the grade 7s? I'm listening. Can you think of any? Write them down and show them to your peer. Write any kind of an adjective that you know. Okay. Now share with your peer. Exchange your papers and share with your peer, and you'll see if you came up with the same story. It's good for you to think about kinds of adjectives. Now, let's come to the kinds of adjectives now. We're saying one of the most valuable services that adjectives provide is a range of comparison. Now, we have 3 comparative forms of adjectives when I talk about the kinds of adjectives. Now, remember, the they provide a range of comparisons. Now, let us look at the three forms. We have descriptive, gives entity some quality or description, right? Like, for instance, it's a palatable food. Ah, this food is so palatable, it's nice, yeah? And you have a sweet potato. It's a descriptive. What kind of a potato? How is the potato? It's sweet. Remember the questions that now we said the adjectives answer? Now this one is a sweet potato because it gives quality to an entity or to a noun. Food is a noun. Potato is a noun. But the food is, this is a palatable food. This is a sweet potato. Now let's come to comparative. Where two things are compared. Now we compare. The word comparative. We compare. You take two things. It's either you look at the similarity or what, but now you compare this. Huh? What do you say when you compare? We say this one, a bigger picture. Bigger, it's a comparative degree because it compares one picture to another. So hence it's a comparative degree. You can say the smallest boy in the classroom or the shortest boy in the classroom. Or you can say what else grade 7s come up? Whatever now comparative degree that you might have. Ne? It's, what am I thinking of now? Let me try to think quick. Okay, we say the bigger picture, or we say tall, and what else? Oh, okay, and the rest that will come up with. Now let's come to superlative degree. Superlative here, where three or more entities are compared. Now remember with comparative, you only compare two things, or two nouns, or two objects, whatever that you compare. But now with superlative, it's more than two. It's three or more entities are compared. The tallest tree in the bush. Ne? The tallest tree in the bush. We say also the, what else can I think of? The tallest tree, the most beautiful girl in the class, the best news I ever had. Remember, adjectives also involve the articles. Like, for instance, a big picture, it's an article. But when you come to superlative degree, we use the article the tallest boy, the smartest boy, ne? The most talkative boy in the class. So these are the comparative forms of adjectives that we come across. I'll just try to run a little bit fast. Now the next, remember we spoke about descriptive. You know what descriptive is? Because they give entities some quality or description, or they give nouns some quality or description. Then the comparative is when you compare two things, and then superlative when you compare three or more things. That one I want to believe that now you got well. You got it so well. Now let's come to still kinds of adjectives, demonstrative. Now we talk about the demonstrative, special adjectives or determinants used to identify or express the relative position of a noun. The relative position of a noun. We say this book. We say it's relative because one person will say this book is here, it's so close to me. But one person will say this book is not as close to me as it is to you. So hence we talk about the relative position. Those girls Those girls. This one are a bit further from you. They are not as close as this book. Those girls. Remember we say demonstrative, they what? What do? They identify or express a relative position of a noun. Now we have that car, not this car. The car that I'm talking about is that one. It's a bit far from me. It's a bit further from me. Hence I say that car, not this car, because it indicates what? A position. Now let's come to relative adjectives. It introduces a clause. Like for instance, our next meeting will be on Monday. The words in blue are the adjectives. Our next meeting will be on Monday. Our next meeting will be on Monday. And what else do we have? I do not know which course I should follow. We say these are the relative adjectives. Now, my grade 7s, I want to give you an activity here before I sign off. I want to give you an activity, and I want to believe that now it will be clear enough for you to see. Let me switch off here, and then I do that. I want to give you this activity now. Forming adjectives. Okay, perhaps I'll have to do it like that for you. I want to give you this activity. Forming adjectives. Forming adjectives. Now it says complete the sentences based on the events in the passage by changing the words in brackets into adjectives. You remember the text that now we read at the beginning? Unfortunately because of time, but let me show you that text quickly. This is the text that I read for you at the beginning of our lesson. Now, an activity that I'm going to give you, it's this. You remember that now we're talking about Bono and Willie, who stood on the roadside. Now, here is an activity for you. It says complete sentences based on the events in the passage by changing the words in brackets into adjectives. Ne? Now, very important. You remember when I read that text, I was actually referring to language in context, that now we need to understand how concepts are used in a particular theme or in a particular context. Now, Bono was care and caution when he reached the derailed train. Who can come up with the answer there? Bono was? Was he care? No. Bono was careful and cautious. We don't say caution, but he was cautious when he reached the derailed train. The situation was, come up, grade 7, change that word in bracket into an adjective. Come up, the situation was danger as the speed engine crashed into the creek. Now let's change the words in brackets into adjective. Yes, we've got it right. The answer will be the situation was dangerous as the speeding engine crashed into the creek. Now the next one. The driver was fortunate to have escaped without injury from the dread accident. Come up with the correct answers there, and then you also have to change those adjectives into, those words in brackets into adjective. Then it will be the situation was dangerous as the speeding engine crashed into the creek. Okay, well, the third one, I was on the third one, I'm sorry for that, the grade 7s. Now the driver was fortunate to have escaped. Now the word fortunate tells us more about the driver. Hence we say it is an adjective. The driver was fortunate to have escaped without injury from the dreadful accident. Do you see that? Now you complete the rest of the activities that I have for you, the grade 7s there. I'm sorry, and the lesson was supposed to have started earlier in the morning, and now it is this time of the day, and I have to give time to other colleagues who are going to present. And I want to thank you very much, the grade 7s. Feel free to ask your teachers to explain to you a little bit further in details where you did not get me well or where you experience a bit of challenge. On that note, thank you and enjoy your weekend. Bye.